Ethan, please, you have to help me. He's dying. Chloe slammed my office door open, her voice cracking into a high-pitched sob. Her face was deathly pale, tears running down her cheeks, smearing her makeup into jagged black streaks. I dropped my pen immediately, my heart hammering against my ribs. Chloe, what's wrong? Who's dying? Sit down, I said, rushing around my desk to grab her arms. Her hands were shaking uncontrollably. It's Julian, she gasped, gripping my wrists so tightly her nails dug into my skin through my shirt. Julian Hayes. My childhood friend. The doctors just called me from the hospital in Chicago. He collapsed. It's an acute organ failure, Ethan. He needs an emergency operation, but his insurance won't cover the private clinic. I need to wire $500,000 right now or they won't even admit him. Julian? I repeated, searching her panicked eyes. I had heard his name a few times over the years, always framed as a quiet, harmless ghost from her past. Chloe, calm down. $500,000 is a massive withdrawal from our operational liquid reserves. We can do it, but it requires a full board signature. We don't have time for a board meeting, she screamed, slapping her hand onto my desk. Every single minute we waste, his organs are shutting down. Do you want his blood on your hands? Do you? No, of course not, I said softly, pulling her into a quick hug. I could feel her whole body trembling against mine. I love this woman. For 5 long years, we had built Vance Tech together from a damp, freezing garage into a multi-million-dollar software empire. She was my vice president, my confidant, and the woman I planned to propose to next month. I trusted her with my life. Before I could say another word, my phone buzzed violently on the glass desk. I picked it up. It was Marcus Reed, my chief legal officer. Ethan, we have an absolute nightmare in Tokyo, Marcus said, his tone sharp and urgent. Our main server chip supplier just halted all shipments. They claim our contract is void due to a missed compliance audit. If you aren't on a plane to Japan in 2 hours to sign the override in person, our entire international network goes dark by tomorrow morning. I pinched the bridge of my nose, feeling the pressure crushing my chest from both sides. Marcus, are you sure I have to go? Can't Chloe handle it? No, Marcus answered strictly. The Japanese directors explicitly requested the chief executive officer. Only your signature works on the master contract. If you don't board the next flight, Vance Tech loses 40% of its annual revenue. I looked back at Chloe. She was staring at me with wide, tear-filled eyes, biting her lips so hard it bled. Ethan, go to Japan, she whispered, her voice trembling. Save the company. But please don't let Julian die while you're gone. Give me temporary signing authority. Transfer the primary equity management power to my account for just 3 days. That way I can bypass the board, release the medical funds, and keep the local office running until you get back. Temporary full authority? I hesitated for a single second. Chloe, that gives you absolute control over my equity shares. Legally, you could make major corporate decisions without my consent. She looked at me as if I had just slapped her across the face. Are you serious right now? You think I care about corporate decisions while my best friend is dying? I built this company with you, Ethan. Do you really trust me that little? I trust you, I said immediately, feeling an instant wave of guilt. I'm sorry. I'm just stressed. I turned to my computer, logged into the secure executive portal, and pulled up the emergency authorization forms. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I'm granting you temporary power of attorney over my shares for 72 hours, I said, typing rapidly. The system will automatically revert control back to me on Friday at midnight. Thank you, Ethan, she breathed, stepping close to kiss my cheek. Her skin felt strangely cold. You're saving his life. I'll never forget this. I clicked submit. A green confirmation banner flashed across the screen. Authorization transferred to Chloe Bennett. I have to pack, I said, grabbing my suit jacket off the chair. Marcus is meeting me at the airport. Keep me updated on Julian's surgery the second he comes out of the operating room. I will, she said, watching me grab my bag. Fly safe, Ethan. Focus on Japan. I'll take care of everything here. I rushed out of the office, heading straight for the elevator. As the metallic doors slowly closed, I caught one last glimpse of Chloe standing in the center of my office. She wasn't crying anymore. She was wiping the tears off her face with the back of her hand, pulling out her personal phone and pressing it to her ear. A calm, faint smile touched the corner of her lips. I told myself I was just imagining things, blaming my exhaustion for the strange knot tightening in my stomach. I turned toward the elevator mirror, adjusted my tie, and rushed to the airport, completely blind to the fact that I had just handed the keys to my entire life to my worst enemy. "Sir, I need you to step back. You no longer have security clearance for this building." The uniformed security guard placed a heavy hand against my chest, blocking the glass turnstiles of Vance Tech headquarters. "Are you out of your mind, Dave?" I demanded, staring at him in disbelief. "I hired you 3 years ago. I own this company." "Not anymore, Ethan," a quiet voice called out from behind the marble pillars. Marcus Reed stepped forward, his eyes red-rimmed and hollow. He held a thick leather folder tucked under his arm. "Marcus, what is the meaning of this?" I grabbed his shoulder, my voice echoes across the lobby. "I spent 4 days trapped in a rural Japanese industrial zone because that supplier issue was completely fabricated. The entire network outage was a ghost setup, Marcus. Someone faked the compliance audit emails." "I know, Ethan," Marcus said softly, leading me toward a shadowed corner near the elevators, away from the staring receptionists. "I figured it out 12 hours after you landed in Tokyo. But by then it was already too late." "Too late for what? Where's Chloe?" Marcus opened the folder and handed me a thick stack of legal documents stamped with official court seals. "Chloe used the temporary signing authority and power of attorney you granted her. She executed a full, permanent restructuring of Vance Tech's primary equity." My vision blurred as I scanned the bold, cold print on the front page. She transferred 70% of my voting shares? To who? "To Hayes Strategic Holdings," Marcus whispered, refusing to meet my eyes. "Controlled by Julian Hayes." "Julian Hayes?" I gasped, the air completely leaving my lungs. "He was supposed to be dying in a Chicago hospital. She said he had acute organ failure. She begged me for the money to save his life." "Julian Hayes was never sick, Ethan," Marcus said, his voice laced with bitter regret. "He's a corporate activist investor and Chloe's former partner. He's been planning this takeover for 6 months. They orchestrated the fake supply chain panic in Japan together just to get you out of the country and force you into signing over control." No, this is a mistake," I stammered, my hands trembling violently as I flipped through the legal pages. "This authority was temporary. It had a 72-hour expiration clause built into the portal." "They bypassed the expiration clause," Marcus explained, pulling out another document. "She filed an emergency executive override before the deadline, claiming you had abandoned your operational duties while abroad. She signed off on a secondary agreement that made the share transfer irrevocable. Is it legal?" I shouted, my voice cracking. "Marcus, you're my chief legal officer. Tell me this isn't legal." "It's airtight, Ethan," Marcus admitted, his voice barely audible. "She had total authority. You typed in the master credentials yourself. On paper, you gave her full power to act on your behalf." "I need to see her," I said, shoving the papers back into his chest. "I need to hear her say it to my face." I pushed past Dave at the turnstile before he could stop me, riding the private elevator straight to the top floor. The double doors opened into the glass-walled main boardroom. Sitting at the head of the long mahogany conference table was a man in a tailored gray suit, sipping espresso. Beside him stood Chloe. She was wearing a sleek red dress, her hair pinned back in an elegant style, completely devoid of the tears and panic she had displayed 4 days ago. "Chloe." I slammed my hands against the boardroom glass door, pushing it open. "What the hell is this?" Julian Hayes lowered his cup, a slow, condescending smile spreading across his face. "Ethan Vance. You came back early. We weren't expecting you until Friday." "Shut up," I snapped, glaring past him at the woman I loved. "Chloe, speak to me. What did you do?" Chloe didn't flinch. She crossed her arms, staring at me with a cold, detached indifference that chilled me to the bone. "I did what was necessary for the survival of Vance Tech, Ethan." "Survival?" I choked out a laugh, taking a step toward her. "I built this empire with you. I loved you. You lied to me about a medical emergency. You faked a man's death to rob me. You were dragging this company down," she said calmly, her tone devoid of any emotion. "Your stubborn refusal to sell equity to major corporate investors was holding us back. You lacked the vision to take us to the next level. Julian has the connections and the capital we actually need. You used me," I whispered, the sheer scale of the betrayal crushing my chest like a lead weight. 5 years, Chloe. We built this from a damp garage. We were going to get married." "You were convenient, Ethan," Julian interrupted, standing up and smoothing his jacket. "You provided the technical genius, but you lacked the killer instinct required for true corporate power. Chloe recognized that months ago. That's why she came to me. You tricked me into signing those papers, I snarled, stepping up to Julian. I will sue you into the ground. I will take back every single share. With what money? Julian smiled, leaning in close. As of 8 o'clock this morning, the board voted to terminate your employment as CEO. Your personal assets linked to Vance Tech Equity have been frozen pending an independent financial audit. You have no legal standing, no vote, and no access to company accounts. Chloe, please? I looked at her one last time, desperate for any flicker of the woman I used to know. Look at me. Tell me this isn't what you want. Chloe looked straight into my eyes, her expression completely frozen. Security, please escort Mr. Vance out of the building. He is displaying signs of emotional instability and is no longer authorized to be on the premises. 2 armed guards entered the room behind me, grabbing my arms. I didn't fight them. I let them drag me backward, away from the boardroom, away from my life's work, and away from the woman who had just destroyed me without shedding a single tear. Drink this before you collapse, my younger sister Sam said, shoving a steaming mug of black coffee into my hands. I sat on the edge of a stained mattress in a cramped, dark studio apartment. My personal bank accounts were frozen. My corporate credit cards were canceled. Everything I had built over 5 grueling years was gone, wiped out in less than a week. I have nothing left, Sam, I mumbled, staring blankly at the floor. My name is mud in the tech sector. Chloe made sure of that with her press releases. Shut up, Ethan, Sam snapped, pulling up a folding chair and opening her high-end laptop. You're acting like a victim, and I didn't drive 6 hours just to watch you feel sorry for yourself. I've been digging through the digital footprint of that share transfer for 18 hours straight. I looked up, rubbing my bloodshot eyes. Marcus already looked at it. He said the power of attorney paperwork was airtight. Marcus is a corporate lawyer who plays by standard rules, Sam replied, turning her screen toward me. I am a senior financial auditor. Look at these transaction logs. Where did Julian's firm route the preliminary valuation deposit? I leaned closer, scanning the complex web of IP addresses and transaction codes. It went through a secondary holding firm in the Cayman Islands, line 408. Exactly, Sam smiled coldly, tapping her pen against the glass display. They used an unregistered offshore dummy account to bypass federal trade regulations and evade immediate acquisition tax. Chloe was so eager to finalize the theft that she overlooked a major compliance law. If federal authorities look at this audit trail, Hayes Strategic Holdings loses its corporate charter. A surge of heat rushed through my veins, breaking the icy numbness that had gripped my chest for days. They committed federal tax fraud during the takeover? Yes, Sam said firmly. But you can't just run to the government yet. Julian has deep political connections. If you attack him without massive financial backing, his legal team will bury you in discovery motions until you starve. I don't have a single dollar, Sam, I said, my voice dropping back into frustration. I can't hire a defense team, let alone take down a multi-million-dollar hedge fund. You don't have money, but you still have your brain, Sam countered, closing her laptop. And there's one person in this city who hates Julian Hayes even more than you do. 2 hours later, I stood in the top-floor office of Sterling Capital, facing Victoria Sterling. She was one of the most powerful venture capitalists in North America, wearing a sharp charcoal suit, evaluating me with icy gray eyes. You look terrible, Ethan, Victoria said bluntly, leaning back in her leather executive chair. I heard you were thrown out of your own building by security. I was, I admitted, taking a seat across from her without being asked. Chloe Bennett and Julian Hayes stole Vance Tech using a forged emergency authorization and an illegal offshore transfer. Victoria sneered at the mention of Julian's name. Julian is a parasite who buys other people's brilliance because he lacks a single creative thought in his own head. He tried to corner my firm on a tech deal last year using underhanded tactics. But why are you in my office? I don't give charity to fallen founders. I'm not asking for charity, Victoria, I said, leaning forward and placing Sam's printed audit file on her desk. I'm offering you the total destruction of Hayes Strategic Holdings and primary stake rights in my next software venture. Victoria glanced down at the documents, her sharp eyes scanning Sam's financial analysis. Offshore routing violations, federal tax evasion. Is this data verified? My sister is a top-tier auditor, I said confidently. The paper trail is undeniable. Julian and Chloe rushed the deal to lock me out, and in their greed, they left a massive legal vulnerability wide open. Interesting, Victoria murmured, a faint, dangerous smile playing on her lips. Julian thinks he owns Vance Tech, but he's actually standing on a mountain of dynamite. What is your plan, Ethan? I don't want to just file a lawsuit and settle, I said, my voice dropping into a hard, calculated register. I want to destroy them completely. I want Julian broke, and I want Chloe to realize she traded her life's work for a sinking ship. I need your capital to set a financial trap. How much funding do you need? Victoria asked, leaning her chin on her hands. $10 million, I answered instantly. We set up a ghost development firm. We leak revolutionary fake patent frameworks into the market that appear to render Vance Tech's current software obsolete. Julian is arrogant and aggressive. He will force Vance Tech to overextend its credit lines to buy those patents from us before investigating them thoroughly. Victoria let out a soft laugh, her eyes flashing with approval. You want to sell him poison and use his own greed to make him drink it. Exactly, I said. Once Vance Tech takes on massive institutional debt to acquire my fake patents, I will use your capital to buy up that debt through secondary creditors. I will become his primary lender. Victoria stood up, extending her right hand across the desk. $10 million is yours, Ethan. In exchange, I want 40% of whatever new company you build out of Vance Tech's ashes. I shook her hand tightly. Deal. It's done, Victoria announced, walking into my temporary war room and tossing a black binder onto the glass table. The shell company, Nexus Innovations, is fully operational. The market believes a rogue group of former Silicon Valley engineers is preparing to auction off a groundbreaking quantum encryption patent. I opened the binder, scanning the forged technical frameworks my team had spent 3 weeks drafting. Did you seed the leaks directly to Julian's inner circle? Of course, Victoria smiled tightly. His head of acquisitions received the confidential memo an hour ago. If Julian believes this encryption framework hits the open market, Vance Tech's core security software becomes completely obsolete overnight. He won't just want to license it, I said, leaning back in my chair, feeling my pulse quicken with cold anticipation. Julian is too arrogant for licensing. He will try to buy the entire patent portfolio outright so he can monopolize the sector and prove to the board that he doesn't need my technical direction. The asking price we listed is $30 million, Victoria cautioned, her gray eyes narrowing. Vance Tech doesn't have that much liquid cash sitting in reserve, Ethan. Not after the administrative mess they caused during your removal. He will leverage the company's assets, I replied calmly. He will take out short-term, high-interest institutional loans to cover the acquisition. I know how his mind works. He thinks short-term hype will double the stock value before the first loan payment is due. My prediction proved accurate less than 48 hours later. Sitting in a coffee shop across from Vance Tech headquarters, I watched through the window as Marcus Reed met me in a quiet corner booth. Ethan, you need to know what's happening inside, Marcus said, keeping his voice down as he slid an internal memo across the table. Julian is losing his mind. He called an emergency board meeting this morning. Did he force through the Nexus patent purchase? I asked, sipping my espresso. Yes, but Chloe tried to stop him, Marcus revealed, leaning in closer. She actually stood up in front of the board and argued against it. She said $30 million was too dangerous, that they hadn't run proper technical stress tests on the Nexus architecture. And how did Julian handle her resistance? He publicly humiliated her, Marcus said quietly. He told her in front of every major shareholder that she was just a secretary playing executive, and that her opinions were irrelevant now that the equity transfer was complete. He reminded her that without his capital network, she would still be running a failing garage startup. I tightened my grip around my warm ceramic cup until my knuckles turned white. So the golden couple is turning on each other already. She cried in her office after the meeting, Ethan, Marcus added, watching my face for a reaction. She looks exhausted. Julian completely stripped her of her operational authority yesterday. He's running the entire firm like a personal dictatorship. She chose her side when she handed him my shares, I said coldly, feeling no pity whatsoever. Did the board approve the loan package? Yes, Marcus confirmed, nodding heavily. Julian backed the $30 million loan using Vance Tech's primary intellectual property as collateral. The funds were wired to Nexus Innovations 2 hours ago. A surge of quiet satisfaction rushed through my chest. Thank you, Marcus. Keep your head down and stay out of his line of fire. As soon as Marcus left, I pulled out my secure phone and called Victoria. The payment went through. The trap is sprung. I see it on my end, Victoria responded, her voice dripping with satisfaction. $30 million has landed safely in our secure account. Now, how do you want to handle the debt notes? Execute stage 2 immediately, I ordered. Julian took out those high-yield loans through Apex Financial and Meridian Credit. Use the $30 million he just paid us, plus the rest of your investment pool, to buy up those debt obligations directly from the lenders. They'll be eager to offload that debt, Victoria laughed softly. High-yield tech loans are considered high-risk right now. We can buy them out at a minor discount. Buy every single dollar of it, Victoria, I insisted. I don't just want to be a creditor. I want to be the sole lender holding the mortgage on Vance Tech's entire existence. By tomorrow morning, Ethan, Julian won't be paying back Apex Financial, Victoria said, her tone hardening into pure steel. He will owe every penny directly to you. If he defaults on a single quarterly interest payment, you will have the legal right to seize every physical and digital asset Vance Tech owns. He will default, I said, looking up at the polished glass exterior of my former corporate tower. The quantum encryption code we sold him is a technical dead end. In 3 days, when his lead engineers try to compile the master framework, the entire system will collapse under load. It can't be fixed because it was mathematically designed to fail. You're ruthless, Ethan, Victoria murmured. I love it. I'm not ruthless, I said, ending the call as I stood up from the table. I'm just taking back what belongs to me. I walked out of the coffee shop, stepping into the afternoon sun. For weeks, I had felt like a ghost haunting the edges of my own life. But as I looked at the shadow cast by the Vance Tech building, I knew the dynamic had completely shifted. Julian thought he was building an empire on my grave, unaware that he had just signed his own financial death warrant. Chloe was discovering the true cost of her betrayal, trapped in a cage of her own making. The countdown had officially begun and I held the remote control. Ethan, please answer me. I stared down at my ringing phone, watching Chloe's name flash across the screen for the 12th time in an hour. Outside, heavy rain lashed against the windows of my temporary office. The news had broken at dawn. Vance Tech's development team had attempted to deploy the Nexus encryption framework, only to watch their entire server infrastructure crash. The $30 million patent was a worthless heap of corrupted code. Investors panicked, stock prices plummeted 60% in 4 hours, and the board demanded an immediate audit. My phone buzzed again with a text message from Chloe. I know Julian lied to me. He's destroying everything. Please meet me at the cafe on 4th Street. I have evidence against him. I'm begging you. An hour later, I pushed open the door of the dimly lit, rain-drenched coffee shop. Chloe sat in a corner booth, shivering despite her heavy coat. Her eyes were swollen, her face blotchy, stripped of the sleek corporate polish she had worn during my eviction. Ethan, she gasped, scrambling to her feet as I approached. You came. Thank God. I sat down across from her, leaving my jacket zipped up, keeping my hands resting flat on the wooden table. You have 10 minutes, Chloe. Say what you brought me here to say. I'm so sorry, Ethan, she sobbed, tears spilling over her lower eyelids and dripping onto her hands. I was an idiot. Julian tricked me. He made me believe you were going to freeze me out of the company once we went public. He promised we'd be equal partners. You chose to believe a snake over the man who loved you for 5 years, I said, my voice dead cold. Don't blame Julian for your own choices. You don't understand how far he's going, she insisted, reaching across the table to grab my wrist. I pulled my hand away before she could touch me. She flinched, holding her hands to her chest. He knows the Nexus patent is fake. He's taking whatever liquid reserves are left in Vance Tech's offshore accounts, over $10 million, and transferring them to a private holding firm in Dubai. He's flying out tonight. I know, I replied smoothly. Chloe blinked, stunned by my reaction. You know? Ethan, he's abandoning the company. He's leaving me to take the legal fall for the debt and the failed patents. He threatened to tell federal regulators that I authorized the fraudulent purchases. Julian uses people until they outlive their utility, I said, leaning back. You were useful when you gave him my equity. Now that the company is bankrupt, you're just collateral damage. You gave up everything for a man who viewed you as an expendable pawn. I have his private emails, she cried out, pulling a flash drive from her purse and shoving it across the laminate table toward me. I saved every message, every wire transfer request, every document proving he orchestrated the fake Japanese supply chain crisis. I will give it all to you. I'll testify against him in court, Ethan. I'll tell the judge that he coerced me. I looked down at the tiny metallic drive sitting between us. Why give this to me now, Chloe? Why not 3 weeks ago? Because I want to make things right, she begged, reaching for my hand again, her voice cracking into a desperate whine. I made a terrible mistake, Ethan. I miss us. I miss the way things were when it was just you and me in that garage. We can fix this. We can rebuild Vance Tech together once Julian is in prison. A hollow laugh escaped my chest. Rebuild? Together? Yes, she pleaded, searching my face for a spark of warmth. I know you still care about me. You wouldn't have come here today if you didn't care. I came here to see the look on your face when you realized what you threw away, I said softly, looking her straight in the eyes. Her face drained of color. Ethan, please. You didn't care about Vance Tech, Chloe. You didn't care about 5 years of work, and you certainly didn't care about me, I said, every word weighted with absolute finality. You didn't come here today out of remorse. You came here because Julian abandoned you, and you're terrified of going to prison alone. That's not true, she screamed, drawing turning heads from the few patrons around us. I love you. No, you don't, I said, standing up from the booth. You love security, and right now you have none. Ethan, don't leave me, she sobbed, grabbing at my jacket as I stepped into the aisle. If you don't take this flash drive, Julian gets away with it. I'll be ruined. Keep the flash drive, I said, looking down at her crumpled, pathetic frame. You can hand it over to the federal authorities yourself when they come to audit the firm tomorrow morning. I already bought Vance Tech's debt notes from the banks, Chloe. I own the company again. And my first act as sole creditor will be filing formal criminal charges against both you and Julian. You're destroying me, she shrieked, tears-ruined makeup cascading down her neck. Actions have permanent consequences, Chloe, I said, sliding my hands into my pockets. You made your choice in that boardroom. Now you get to live with it. I turned my back on her, walking out into the pouring rain. Her frantic cries were cut off as the heavy glass door swung shut behind me. I stood on the wet pavement, taking a deep, clean breath of cold air, feeling the final lingering threads of heartbreak detach from my soul. The betrayal no longer burned. It was just cold, hard fuel driving me toward the final chapter. Gentlemen, we have no choice, Julian's arrogant voice echoed through the double glass doors of the grand boardroom. Vance Tech is facing insurmountable debt liabilities. I am calling an immediate vote to liquidate our core physical assets and transfer remaining digital intellectual reserves to our offshore subsidiary. I stood outside in the quiet corridor, resting my hand flat against the cold wooden door frame. Beside me stood Marcus Reed, holding a thick leather folder, and behind us were 2 federal agents wearing dark suits. Are we ready, Ethan? Marcus asked quietly, adjusting his glasses. The paper trail is complete. We're ready, I replied, turning the silver handle and pushing the heavy doors wide open. What is the meaning of this intrusion? Julian shouted, slamming his pen onto the mahogany table. He sat at the head of the conference room, surrounded by 6 terrified board members. Ethan? You don't belong here. Security. Security isn't coming, Julian, I said calmly, stepping inside as the federal agents moved into position near the doors. I canceled their contract 10 minutes ago. Julian's face flushed deep crimson as he pointed a trembling finger at me. You have no legal standing in this building. You were terminated by a full board vote. Get out before I have you arrested for criminal trespass. Actually, Mr. Hayes, you're the one going to jail, Agent Miller said, stepping forward and displaying his official federal credentials. Julian Hayes, you are under arrest for federal tax evasion, wire fraud, and the illegal diversion of corporate assets through unregistered offshore accounts. This is ridiculous. Julian panicked, spinning around to face the silent board members. This is a setup. Chloe handled those offshore wire transfers. I didn't sign off on those accounts. Chloe sat in the far corner of the room, her eyes hollow, her hair disheveled, looking like a ghost. She slowly shook her head, her voice barely audible. I gave them the private emails, Julian. I gave them everything. You backstabbing bitch. Julian roared, lunging toward her across the table, but Agent Miller grabbed his shoulders, slamming him backward onto the polished floor. Julian Hayes, you have the right to remain silent, Agent Miller recited, pulling Julian's wrists behind his back and clicking heavy steel handcuffs around his wrists. Ethan, please? Julian yelled, struggling against the officer's grip as he was forced to his feet. We can make a deal. I have $8 million in private accounts. I can transfer it to you today. Just tell them this was a corporate misunderstanding. I don't need your $8 million, Julian, I said, looking down at him with complete detachment. You used my company's assets as collateral for $30 million in high-yield institutional debt from Apex Financial. Do you remember who bought those debt notes yesterday? Julian froze, his eyes widening in horror as the truth finally registered in his mind. No, you couldn't. I own your debt, Julian, I said smoothly. As Vance Tech's primary and sole creditor, I am formally executing a total debt for equity takeover. Every single share you stole from me is now cancelled. Vance Tech belongs to me again. Ethan, you bastard. Julian screamed, kicking blindly as the two federal agents dragged him through the boardroom doors and down the hallway toward the elevators. His frantic shouts faded into empty silence. The remaining board members sat completely frozen, terrified to speak, staring at me as if I were a ghost returned to claim what was stolen. You are all dismissed, I told the board members, my voice calm but absolute. Hand your security passes to Marcus on your way out. My legal team will process your severance packages by tomorrow afternoon. They scrambled out of their chairs without saying a single word, leaving the room within seconds. Only Chloe remained, sitting motionless in her chair, staring blankly at the glass wall. She looked up at me, tears streaming silently down her pale cheeks. What happens to me now, Ethan? She whispered, her voice cracking. Are they going to arrest me too? You cooperated with the federal investigation, Marcus answered from the doorway, opening his file. The prosecutor agreed to grant you conditional immunity regarding the fraud charges, but your professional reputation in this industry is officially over. You are stripped of all corporate equity, and your financial licenses are revoked permanently. Chloe buried her face in her trembling hands, weeping quietly. I lost everything, my career, my home, my pride, everything. You didn't lose it, Chloe, I said, standing near the head of the table. You threw it away the moment you traded loyalty for greed. I trusted you with my life, and you sold me out for a liar. I know, she sobbed, looking up at me with desperate, pleading eyes. Can you ever forgive me, Ethan? Forgiveness isn't relevant anymore, I said, looking her straight in the eyes without a trace of anger left in my heart. You chose your path and I chose mine. Now please leave my building. Chloe slowly stood up, wiping her face with the back of her wet hands. She looked around the luxurious boardroom one last time, the room we had dreamed about building back when we worked out of a cold garage, and walked out the door with her head hanging low, completely broken. I walked over to the tall glass window, looking out over the city skyline. Marcus stepped up beside me, placing a gentle hand on my shoulder. The company is yours again, Ethan, Marcus said softly. We have a clean slate. Yes, we do, I replied, taking a deep, full breath. I walked back to the head of the mahogany table, pulled out the high-backed executive leather chair, and sat down in my rightful seat. There was no loud celebration, no overwhelming surge of pride, and no desire for further vengeance. The anger that had burned inside my chest for weeks was gone, replaced by a deep, immovable sense of clarity. I had faced total betrayal, survived the darkest valley of my life, and rebuilt my foundation stronger than before. I adjusted my suit jacket, pulled my laptop forward, and got back to work.